It starts with a child's voice. Not a scream, not a laugh. Just a whisper from the corner of the room. Mommy. You get up. You check the hallway. You check the window. There's no one there. And yet, you feel the air has changed. Thicker. Still. Like something's watching from the dark. This is Creep Canvas, and I'm the creep. And tonight, we travel to Southport, a coastal town in northern England. Quiet, pleasant, unassuming. Where a mother and her young daughter moved into a modest 2-story house with white walls, wide windows, and a locked room upstairs. A room that wasn't locked by accident. A room that had a name, even though no one had lived there for years. They called it Emily's room. And by the time they left, that name would haunt them forever. When Sarah and her 6-year-old daughter Macy moved into the house on a foggy morning in early spring, they thought they were starting over. Fresh paint, bright rooms, a backyard with flowers beginning to bloom. Sarah was recovering from a divorce. Macy was adjusting to a new school. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. For the first few weeks, the house felt peaceful. Macy played with her dolls. Sarah repainted the kitchen. They had pizza on the floor because the table hadn't arrived yet. They laughed. They were okay. Until one night, Macy asked, "Can Emily sleep with me again?" Sarah froze. "Who's Emily?" Macy just smiled. "She's the girl who stays in the upstairs room. She talks funny, and she's cold." At first, Sarah dismissed it. An imaginary friend. A leftover ghost story from school. Just the mind of a child adjusting to change. But then, she started noticing things. Macy would stare into corners. She'd leave a seat empty at the table. She'd talk to herself, always in a hushed tone, like she was being told a secret. One day, Sarah walked past Macy's room and heard her whisper, "No, I don't want to go there. He doesn't like it when I go." When Sarah asked who he was, Macy wouldn't answer. There's something especially chilling about a child seeing what you can't. Because children don't pretend fear. Not that kind. In this episode, we'll walk through the full haunting that unfolded inside that Southport home. We'll meet Emily, the spirit of a little girl who seemed playful, but always frightened. We'll uncover the man in the hallway, a presence that only revealed itself when the lights were off and the mother was alone. We'll explore the locked room and the horrifying moment when Sarah realized her daughter had been invited inside. We'll look at the family's attempts to fight back, with reason, with religion, with running. And we'll ask the question that haunts so many cases like this. What happens when the ghosts aren't attached to a house, but to you? The room at the end of the hall was locked when they moved in. The landlord said it was just for storage. He said he would remove the key later. But every night, Macy would stand in front of that door. She never tried to open it. She never knocked. She just stood there. Sometimes for a minute, sometimes for longer. And one night, Sarah found the door open. Macy was standing inside. The room was completely empty, except for a child's drawing pinned to the wall with thumbtacks. A girl with black hair and a tall, shadowy figure standing behind her. Every haunting begins with a moment you could almost miss. A flicker, a sound, a feeling that something is off, even if everything looks right. But before that moment, there's the illusion of peace. Sarah and Macy moved into the house in early April. The sun came through the wide front windows every morning. The neighbors waved. The local park was only a few blocks away. It was a fresh start. Sarah was rebuilding. She had left an unhealthy relationship, scraped together enough savings, and found a home where her daughter could grow up safe. The rent was affordable, the location perfect. The house? Old, yes, but it had charm. Macy picked her room right away, the one facing the street, with yellow curtains and a slanted ceiling that made it feel like a fairy tale cottage. She said, "It feels like someone already lives here." Sarah laughed it off. There were things Sarah noticed early on. Little things. The spare room upstairs had no handle on the inside. The floorboards outside that room always felt colder than the rest of the house, even when the heat was on. And the walls had been freshly painted, except for one, which looked like it had been painted twice. A thicker coat, like something had been covered. But these didn't seem like red flags, just quirks of an old house. That's what she told herself. That's what she needed to believe. Macy was adjusting, but she talked about Emily almost every day. At first, Sarah thought it was cute, a lonely child inventing a playmate. "Emily wants to color with me. Emily said not to go near the window at night. Emily said the man comes out after dinner." Sarah assumed it was imagination, that her daughter was working through anxiety in her own way. So when Macy set a place at the table for Emily, Sarah let it slide. When she said Emily didn't like loud noises, Sarah turned the TV down. When she said Emily didn't like Sarah, though, she started to worry. Children can be honest in ways adults aren't ready for, and sometimes they say things no child should know. Around the second week, Sarah began to notice things moving. A mug she swore she left on the table, found shattered on the kitchen floor. A toy placed carefully on a shelf, now lying in the middle of the hallway. Macy's doll, the one she always slept with, missing for 3 days, found under the crawl space stairs. Macy said, Emily took her away because she didn't like the way I was looking at her. Sarah didn't answer. She was starting to feel something too. Not fear exactly, but pressure. The kind that creeps in when you're alone in a quiet room, and you realize it isn't actually quiet. One night, Sarah went upstairs after doing dishes. Macy was asleep. The hallway was dark, and the door at the end of the hall, the one to the locked room, was slightly open. She hadn't opened it. There was no key. She pushed it open slowly. Inside, nothing. No furniture, no boxes, just bare floors, peeling wallpaper, and in the far corner, a small handprint on the inside of the window. Too small to be Sarah's, too fresh to be old. The next day, she called the landlord. He said, "That room's always been sealed. I'm surprised it's open." Then he hung up. That's when Sarah stopped pretending. Stopped writing off the cold as draft events. Stopped blaming Macy for the missing objects. Stopped thinking this was just an adjustment period. She started to believe that maybe they weren't alone. And she started sleeping with the hallway light on, just in case. Because the first stage of a haunting isn't terror. It's erosion. Of sleep. Of peace. Of certainty. And Sarah's certainty was already breaking. There's something different about the way children describe ghosts. They don't talk about horror. They talk about friendship, or secrets, or feeling watched, but not in a scary way. At least, not at first. Macy talked to Emily every day. She told her stories, sang her songs, laughed with someone Sarah couldn't see. Sarah would find her coloring book alone on the floor. 2 coloring books out, 2 sets of crayons. 1 untouched, 1 used. Macy would say, "Emily only likes blue. She says red reminds her of when she was sick." It was such an oddly specific thing. Too specific for a 6-year-old to invent, Sarah thought. But again, she brushed it off. Until the drawings started to change. Macy had always drawn silly things. Cats with big eyes, rainbow flowers, stick figures holding hands. But now she was drawing something else. A girl with long black hair, standing alone in the corner of her room. Sometimes the girl smiled. Sometimes she had no mouth. Sometimes there was something behind her, tall, black, shapeless. In one picture, the girl was reaching out with a speech bubble that said, "Don't let him see me." Sarah asked, "Who's him?" Macy paused. "The man in the hallway." It was late. Macy had been asleep for hours. Sarah had just turned off the TV when she saw something out of the corner of her eye, near the staircase. She turned, expecting to see Macy awake and out of bed. But it wasn't Macy. It was a little girl. thin, pale, wearing a faded dress, her head slightly tilted. She stood still at the top of the stairs, just watching. No sound, no motion. Sarah blinked and the girl was gone. She rushed upstairs, but Macy was asleep. But her bedroom door was wide open, and her doll, the one she always held in bed, was lying just outside the room as if it had been dropped. The next morning, Sarah asked, "Did you get up last night?" Macy shook her head. Emily did. She said she wanted to see the house in the dark. Sarah asked why. Macy frowned. Because that's when he doesn't look. He only watches when it's light. That was the first time Sarah felt true fear. Not for herself, but for her daughter. Because it meant Macy believed this wasn't just a ghost. It was a game of hiding. And Emily was hiding from something. Sarah tried to be strong. She didn't want to scare her daughter, didn't want to feed the idea. So she started talking to Emily out loud. Mostly when Macy wasn't around. She'd say, "You're welcome here, but you can't scare Macy. Please don't walk at night. You're safe now." And at first, it seemed to help. The house felt calm. The cold spots stopped. Macy started sleeping through the night again. Until one morning, Sarah found every cabinet in the kitchen standing open. Every drawer pulled, a knife on the floor, and written in chalk on the back door were the words, "He knows." Macy said she didn't write it, and Sarah believed her, because she didn't own any chalk. Macy stopped playing in her room. She said Emily told her the man was angry, and that he didn't like when they smiled too much. Sarah asked, "What man?" Macy pointed to the hallway and said, "He's tall. He stands behind you when you do the dishes." That night, Sarah didn't sleep, and the hallway light, which had always worked, flickered out. Emily had gone from playmate to protector, and whatever she was afraid of, it had just entered the story. Not all hauntings come from the dead. Some feel older than death, darker than grief, something that doesn't want to be seen until it does. And when it does, it watches, waits, and begins to choose. For weeks, it had been Macy at the center of everything. The drawings, the whispers, the ghost girl in the hallway. But in late June, that changed. Emily stopped appearing. Macy no longer talked to anyone in the corners. She was quiet, withdrawn. And Sarah began to notice that the strange things happening in the house were happening to her now. It was around 3:00 a.m. Sarah was alone in her bed reading. Macy had fallen asleep hours earlier. The hallway light was on, something she always left burning, now more out of instinct than superstition. Then it flickered, twice, then went out. She didn't move, didn't breathe. And then, a shape stepped into her doorway. It didn't move like a person. It slid, as if the floor beneath it wasn't solid. Tall, dark. Its shoulders were too broad. Its head slightly tilted, the same way Emily's had been. No features, no face. Just a void that looked at her. Sarah sat upright, and the shape was gone. The next morning, she told herself it was sleep paralysis, a trick of the light, a dream bleeding into reality. She cleaned the house and opened the windows, lit a candle in every room. But that night, it happened again. And this time, she wasn't asleep. She was brushing her teeth in front of the bathroom mirror. Door open. In the reflection, she saw a figure standing at the end of the hallway, perfectly still behind her. She turned quickly, but there was nothing. But when she looked back at the mirror, the steam from the shower had formed the outline of a hand pressed flat against the glass. Sarah stopped sleeping. She started sitting in Macy's room at night, reading aloud until the child drifted off. She kept a flashlight next to her pillow and a knife under the mattress. Every night around 3 a.m. she'd hear it, a sound from the hallway. Not footsteps, but breathing. Not loud, but deliberate, measured, wet, as if something was exhaling just outside the door. He didn't speak. He didn't touch. He didn't scream or howl. He just waited and watched and grew bolder. Finally, Sarah couldn't take it anymore. She called the landlord. Not about ghosts, about the door, the one to the room they weren't using. It kept opening on its own now, always around 3 a.m. The landlord came by the next day grumbling about old hinges. He went upstairs with a toolkit and flashlight, and within 10 minutes, he came back down, pale. He said, "There's something behind the plaster in that room." Sarah asked, "What do you mean?" He just shook his head. "It's not my place. Just don't go knocking around in there." Then he left and never came back. That night, Sarah stood in the hallway. Macy was asleep. Every light in the house was on. She faced the door at the end, the one that had opened on its own for weeks. She walked to it slowly and grabbed the knob. And the moment her hand touched it, she heard it. A voice. Male. Not shouting, not whispering, just breathing words. "She's mine." Sarah stepped back. The hallway lights flickered again, and something rushed past her. Cold, thick, invisible, but it laughed as it passed. The man in the hallway wasn't a ghost. He wasn't a memory, or a trick, or a figment of trauma. He was something else. And now, he had noticed her. There's a moment in every haunting where the fear stops being about the ghost and starts being about the people around you. When no one believes you, when they stop looking at you like you're haunted and start looking at you like you're crazy. Sarah began missing work. She was too exhausted, too distracted, too afraid to leave Macy alone, even in the daytime. Bills piled up. She let dishes sit in the sink. She kept every light on, even when she couldn't afford the electricity. At night, she'd lie awake and listen to the sounds. Breathing behind the walls, the hallway creaking under phantom weight, whispering like a conversation happening just beneath the edge of understanding. And in the morning, it was gone. She tried to talk to people, a friend, her sister, a pediatrician. The response was always the same. Are you sure you're just not stressed? You've been through a lot. Children make up things. It's natural. Even Macy's teacher called to express concern. Macy had started drawing disturbing pictures again. A woman with long hair, screaming. A man with no eyes, floating above a bed. When Sarah showed the drawings to a counselor, they suggested it was trauma-based play, something left over from the divorce. Sarah wanted to scream. Instead, she nodded. Because when you tell people you're haunted, they don't hear, "I'm scared." They hear, "I'm unstable." And then Macy changed. She stopped talking about Emily. She stopped smiling. She started waking up in the middle of the night and walking into Sarah's room. Not scared, not crying, just blank. Like she didn't know why she was there. One night, Sarah asked, "Macy, are you okay?" Macy stared at her for a moment and said, "He said I'm not allowed to answer that." And then she turned and walked back to bed. Sarah started doubting herself. She recorded the hallway at night and played it back in the morning. There was nothing. No footsteps, no breathing. She wrote down everything in a journal. Times, temperatures, voices. She brought in a motion sensor light, and it never triggered, even when she felt something pass by her bed. She began to wonder, what if I'm doing this? What if I've lost it? Until one night, she found the journal torn to pieces, and written across the bathroom mirror in soap, "Stop writing, just listen." She lived alone, and she did not own that kind of soap. Macy was at her grandmother's. You can gaslight someone until they break, but being gaslit by your own house, that breaks something deeper. Sarah stopped eating. She was running on caffeine, fear, and adrenaline. She looked in the mirror and barely recognized herself. Her eyes sunken, her hands trembling, and her skin pale. She tried to pray, but the words wouldn't come. She tried to leave the house, but something always pulled her back. Macy started sleepwalking. Once, Sarah found her standing in the corner of the living room, facing the wall, whispering something under her breath. When she touched her shoulder, Macy turned and hissed, "He's tired of waiting," then blinked and didn't remember a thing. And then Emily's room changed. The door, once stuck, then opening on its own, was now open constantly. Sarah would shut it, even block it with a chair, and wake up to find it wide open again. One night she looked inside and swore she saw a girl in the corner, but it wasn't Emily. This girl had no face, no hair, just black void, arms stretched to her sides, swaying gently. Sarah screamed. Macy didn't wake up. Nothing moved, except the figure, which slowly turned away and disappeared. It wasn't just about Emily anymore. It never was. Whatever haunted that house wasn't playing a game. It was waiting. And now, Sarah had run out of time. Every haunting has a beginning. A death, a crime, a secret so dark it stains the walls long after the people are gone. Sarah had lived with fear, the doubt, the presence that watched her from the hallway every night. But it wasn't until she started asking why that the haunting finally answered. It started with a trip to the local library. Sarah wasn't looking for ghost stories. She wanted property records, old blueprints, tenant histories, anything that could explain what was happening in her home. At first, the librarian said the records for her address were incomplete. Missing pages, outdated listings, no real explanation. But then she found a line item from 1974. It listed the house not as a private residence, but as a government-placed foster home. That part had never been disclosed. The foster family, the Hawthorns, and in small smudged handwriting beneath their names, death reported, child found deceased on premises. No name, no age, no explanation. Sarah spent days trying to track it down. Eventually, she found a local blog run by a retired caseworker, one who used to handle child welfare in Southport during the 70s. In a post from 2015, she mentioned a girl named Emily Hawthorne, 8 years old, foster placement, described as withdrawn, timid, and imaginative. Emily was found dead in her room. No signs of trauma, no suicide note, just a quiet body curled under a blanket. The official ruling? Respiratory failure in sleep. But the caseworker disagreed. She said Emily had complained for months about being watched at night by the dark man. She said he lived in the walls. She said he had no eyes. Sarah stopped reading because she'd heard those words before from Macy. Desperate, Sarah contacted the caseworker. She was in her 80s now, living in a retirement home. Sarah didn't expect her to answer the phone, but she did. And when Sarah asked if she remembered Emily Hawthorne, the woman said, "That house should have been torn down." Sarah asked why. And the caseworker paused and said, "Because Emily wasn't the first." Over the next few days, Sarah uncovered more. 3 previous owners, all women, all single mothers. Each one left abruptly. One was institutionalized. One moved without notice and changed her name. One refused to speak about her time in the house at all. None of them ever stayed longer than 2 years. Sarah found a news clipping from 1998. A mother had filed a police report claiming her daughter had been possessed by an unseen force in the home. The daughter had drawn disturbing images of a man made of smoke standing over her crib. Police never investigated. The house was rented out again the following year. Sarah couldn't find a name, no burial record, no mugshot, nothing on the so-called Dark Man. But one theory emerged, quietly, from message boards and half-archived forums. The story went that the house was originally built atop land used as an isolation ward during the cholera outbreaks of the 1800s. Several bodies were buried in the area without markers. One belonged to an orderly who was later accused of harming the children in his care. He died before any charges were brought. People said he hated women, hated children, and that his spirit had latched on to places of vulnerability. The places no one looks twice at, like foster homes, like tired mothers, like little girls with imaginary friends. Suddenly, everything clicked. The locked door, the handprint in the window, the voice that spoke only at night, the phrase etched in chalk, "He knows." It wasn't just Emily who haunted the house. It was the thing that haunted Emily. And it hadn't gone with her. It had stayed behind, waiting for the next child, the next mother, the next secret no one would believe. Sarah didn't need more proof. She knew the house's history now, but she also knew it wasn't history. It was still happening, and it wasn't finished. Some hauntings don't end when you leave the house, because what's attached to a place can sometimes find a way to follow the people inside it. Sarah didn't pack in a panic. She didn't run out screaming. She made a plan. Quiet. Careful. She told Macy they were taking a trip to visit Grandma for a few weeks, and Macy didn't argue. She didn't even ask why. By then, she had stopped asking anything. She had grown quieter, paler. Sometimes, Sarah would catch her whispering under her breath to no one, her eyes glassy and unfocused. The girl who once danced through the living room in sock feet and giggled over cartoons, she was gone, and Sarah wasn't going to lose whatever was left. They slept in the living room, mattress on the floor, lights on. Suitcases were zipped, keys on the counter. Around 2:30 a.m., Macy woke up crying. Not screaming, just quietly sobbing. Sarah held her. She asked, "Did you have a bad dream?" Macy shook her head and whispered, "Emily said goodbye." Sarah asked what she meant, and Macy said, She said he's not watching her anymore, and then she fell back asleep. Sarah didn't. At sunrise, they left. Sarah locked the door behind her, even though she knew there was no point. She didn't tell the landlord. She didn't break the lease. She just walked away. She moved in with her mother across town. A small flat, noisy, but safe. Macy started sleeping through the night again. She laughed at cartoons. She asked for pancakes. She colored pictures with faces. They never said the name Emily again, not for months. Then one night, in the new apartment, Sarah woke up at 3:07 a.m. to the sound of her daughter's voice, whispering, not to herself, to someone else. Sarah got out of bed and stood outside Macy's door. She heard two voices. One was Macy's, the other was lower, scratchier. Not a child. Sarah opened the door fast. Macy was alone. Sitting in the corner of the room facing the wall. She looked up and smiled. It's okay. He's not mad anymore. A few days later, Sarah found something tucked behind a dresser. A drawing. Macy had hidden it. It showed their new apartment, drawn in bright crayon colors. The front door, the living room, and her bed. And next to it, a tall figure. Long arms, no eyes, standing at the end of the hall. Next to him, a smaller shape, a girl in blue. And above them, in a speech bubble, he's still looking. Sarah realized then they hadn't escaped. They'd just become the next chapter. Sarah changed her number, moved again 2 years later. Macy grew older, stopped talking about ghosts, but she never slept without the light on, never used closets, never sat with her back to a window. She's in her 20s now, and sometimes when she's really tired, when she's between sleep and waking, she hears a child's voice whisper, "Shh, he's watching again," and she doesn't open her eyes. You've been listening to Creep Canvas. I'm the Creep. If this episode left a chill in your bones, share it, review it, and tell someone who still sleeps with the light on. And if you've heard a voice in the dark, especially one that wasn't yours, we want to hear your story. Until next time, don't answer the knock. Don't speak to the corner. And whatever you do, don't look too long into the dark, because sometimes it looks back.